Hello, my name is Monica Fleming. I recently finished cycling the tour Aotearoa, and I wanted to make a video overview type thing for people who are considering doing the tour or who are doing the tour and just looking for more information. So, a little background about me is I didn't have a lot of experience bikepacking before this. My longest tour was 5 days. So, I'd say it's pretty beginner friendly. You're definitely going to want to have some um, backpacking experience if you haven't already bikepacked a lot, or, you want some bikepacking experience probably. Um, but yeah, logistically, it's not very challenging, especially if you get the guidebook. Like, that'll help a lot. So for training, I didn't train for this tour. A lot of reasons. I didn't have my bike 2 months prior to the tour. So I just took it slow in the beginning. I'd say it was just a sort of challenging first few weeks, but all in all, it worked out. So bike setup, I was on a Salsa Fargo bike, which is just a gravel bike, no suspension, pretty big tires, just a couple sections where I wished I had suspension, but for the most part, my bike did perfectly fine. Getting to Cape Ranga, if you're taking the traditional route from north to south, is probably logistically the most challenging part of the entire tour. I'd say the most common route is for people to take a bus from Auckland to Kaitaia and then take a shuttle up to Cape Ranga. The shuttle is really expensive. I think it's like 500 New Zealand dollars. So you may consider biking up to Cape Ranga from Kaitaia. I've heard people were doing that, and it adds like a day or something. The road isn't terribly busy, or at least it wasn't when I did it, and I did it during the holidays, so it wasn't too bad. I definitely recommend joining the Tour Aotearoa Facebook page. There you can put your feelers out and see if anyone's like booking a shuttle, or this guy I met on 90 Mile Beach, he got a ride with someone's mom who was driving him up there, and he offered to give people rides, so you might get lucky that way. If you're going from south to north, there are a lot of options for you. I think probably the most common one would just be going from Queenstown and then catching a bus to Invercargill and then down to Bluff. Dunedin has an airport, so you could fly into Dunedin and then take the Catlin Coast bike tour to Bluff. I did it from Bluff to Dunedin. It's a really nice tour. There is an airport in Invercargill. I don't know if big planes go there. But if you could fly into Invercargill, that's gonna be logistically the easiest, because then you just take the bus to Bluff. The buses I found were easier than I thought they were going to be. There's kind of all this anticipation because they're like, the bus driver has a right to turn you down, especially if it doesn't think he's gonna have room in the bus. I never ran into that issue. All of them sort of do it a little different. Like sometimes they charge you $10, which they have the right to do, just based on their system. Safety considerations. I want some high visibility clothes and maybe some bike lights and stuff. The further on you go on the tour, I feel like you end up on busy roads sometimes, like the West Coast. You're on the road for a really long time, and it's just good to have high visibility, especially if it's rainy or cloudy or anything like that, which totally can be. Wildlife, as far as scary wildlife, New Zealand's nice because there's no snakes, no bears, no wolves, no cougars, pretty much nothing that can kill you, but there are wild boar and feral dogs and cats. I never ran into them. I never met anyone who ran into them, but I saw on some websites people were talking about them. So they can be a problem, apparently. And then the biggest pest you're probably definitely going to run into are possums, which that's a whole thing in New Zealand. It's kind of funny. I didn't know about it before I went down there, but eventually it just becomes such a big part of, because they're basically the Department of Conservation has waged war on the possums because the possums and the cats and some of the rats kill off the endemic bird species because in New Zealand the birds sort of evolved without having natural predators, and then they introduced all these predators and they started eating their eggs, and they have like a certain percentage of them have tuberculosis, so you do kind of want to like avoid them if you can. Weather considerations, probably like your biggest obstacle in New Zealand's going to be weather. Like it can rain a lot. On the west coast of the South Island is like a notoriously rainy area. So, but there's, a way around that area. If you're looking at the weather forecast and you see that it's looks like really bad rain, you could do the Sounds to Sound cycle route, which is on the east side of the mountains. The good things about it, I think logistically it's a little more challenging. But yeah, so that's an option. Some good apps. Windy is really good for like head and tailwind. I found it to be really accurate. And the Met Service is sort of like the National Meteorological Service, so they have the best forecasts. Another thing to consider is you want to have like a wide range of temperature sort of setups, like with your sleeping system and your cycling systems. The North Island, like it was really hot, like it was a problem. It was so hot. And for me at least. And then the South Island, there were a couple days and nights where it was very chilly, and I was glad I had my puffy and, some warmer, like a wool hat and all that stuff. And sun protection is really important in this part of the world because they have a really high UV index and like they have really high rates of skin cancer, and I don't know, you can just get totally baked. So I don't like bringing a lot of sunscreen just because it's heavy and you have to like get more of it and it's expensive. So I just brought a sun shirt, a visor to wear under my helmet, sunglasses, and some leggings. And then I just had like a little thing of sunscreen for my hands, face, and body. You're probably going to be camping a lot unless you have some money to throw at this. I did a lot of freedom camping. It's kind of like accepted in some places and it seems like taboo in other places. So what I would recommend you doing is just checking on Google Maps, type in freedom camping, look at the areas you're interested in camping at, and just seeing what the comments say. Dock campsites or something, that's the Department of Conservation. They're sort of like the federal land use organization, kind of like the National Park Service, but I think they just manage all public lands in New Zealand. They have a lot of campsites. We don't go to enough of them to get a camping pass because some of them are free, some of them are really cheap, some of them are a little bit more pricey, but in general, I'd say they're pretty basic. They're usually just like a pit toilet and a water source, sometimes not like potable water. You have to filter it. And then something you're going to see a lot of are these things called holiday parks. It's just what they call their campsites. And they're pretty reasonable, anywhere between $15 and $25, and they usually have like a lot of amenities. So for navigation and route tracking, I would just get Komoot. My cycling partner had Komoot and we used it and it was really great. I like to have my navigation on 2 different devices just because I've had my phone break in the past and been very lost and didn't really like that. Also, having a paper copy of the Kennett Brothers official TA guidebook. Used it a lot for planning as far as like elevation profiles and recommended campsites, and there are 3 sections that are kind of just more challenging. One of them I didn't even do. That's the big river section. It's in sort of the central part of the South Island, or maybe like more like the north part of the South Island. Perilous Bridge to Nelson was sort of a part I was worried about, but it wasn't that bad. I'd just say like the top of the pass was kind of tricky going up and down, but it's a big gravel road so you can push your bike pretty easily. Another challenging section is in Wanganui National Park, and it's from Aotearoa to the Bridge to Nowhere. There's a lot of different ways to approach this section. It's just sort of like one of those notoriously muddy sections. There's a little bit of challenging single track involved in it, but give yourself enough time to do it. We'll book their jet boat for the next day, camp at the dock site in Aotearoa, and then hustle down to the bridge to nowhere. Conditions, I feel like it can be really hard, so I was worried about it, so I booked it for the next day and camped on the end toward the bridge to nowhere. There's like a couple different campsites. I'll say the last campsite is not really ideal. There are a lot of different ways to approach this section. So I'd say the first section of this trail is just like a gravel road, a little muddy. Then there's like the challenging single track section. There's only one part of that section where I like physically remember like pushing my bike up over like this crazy rock thing, but other than that, it was pretty easy. I pushed my bike a lot of it because it was sort of narrow and there was like a little cliff situation going on, and I was just sort of not wanting to deal with that mentally. But then after you get past that section, things get significantly better, except for the mud gets worse. And I'd gone on a day where it really hadn't been raining and it was still really muddy. Going down the pass down at the bridge to nowhere, there's a lot of like these really narrow bridges. I read that people with panniers were having to like take off their panniers, walk across the bridge, go back, grab the panniers. It could take a lot of time. So you might want to take the alternate route at the top of the pass. There's also options just to avoid the section altogether on the canoe trip from Aotearoa. It's a 3-day canoe trip. Or you can catch the canoe trip from Taumaruni. They come, they give you a canoe, sort of like a barrel to put your stuff in and a life vest, and then they take your bikes to Pipiriki, which is like the village you end up in if you do the jet boat or the canoe trip, or if you even bike around. There's even another section where you can just avoid Aotearoa and you bike around. The people I talked to said it was really fun. They liked it. It was a nice break off their bike. There is one section that has rapids, but they said it wasn't hard, but they are called 50-50, so apparently 50% of people tip. I met another group of people who their canoe trip got canceled because it had been raining a lot. So that's something to consider. In the jet boat, there's 3 other ferries that you will encounter. One of them's sort of optional. So the first one you run into is the Rawuni ferry, and that's a very easy ferry to manage. I think it's like a New Zealand dollar, and then it's like runs all the time. The ferry you'll encounter is the Kaipara ferry, and that is from Punta Point to Helensville. That one's tricky. I didn't do it. I took the alternate route, which was, I enjoyed the alternate route. This ferry is quite expensive. I think it's incorporated into the tour for the brevet, which is like the Tour Aotearoa sort of race time challenge thing. It's not a race, or people are very particular about calling it a race. So everyone who I talked to who managed that ferry did so through the Facebook group. So if you can get a lot of people to go, it's less expensive and they'll run it for you. The ferry from Wellington to Picton, and that's runs all the time. I think there's 2 different outfitters who do it. A couple side trips I wanted to mention that do not require you to go off the road or on any busy roads. One of them is the in Ahipara. So after you go from Cape Ranga, you bike down 90 Mile Beach and you end up in this town called Ahipara. And it's like a surf town. It's really cute. And I did a surfing lesson there, and it was the first time I ever surfed. It was a lot of fun. Hobbiton was a must do for me, but it's very conveniently close to the TA. It's near the section around Matamata, and there's a nice campsite. I think it's in the recommended TA campsites, and it's called Brock's Place. It was like $5 or something, and it's a 30-minute walk from Hobbiton. And then another side trip I wanted to mention was Marua Hot Springs, which is just outside of Springs Junction, sort of on the northern part of the South Island, out by Reefton area, kind of up that middle pass to go to the east side of the mountain. It was 70 New Zealand dollars, but it was camping. You got to use the hot springs, saunas, cold plunge, steam rooms. They had like the sauna rituals with the towels and the face masks and stuff like that. It was pretty fun. And yoga's included. The last side trip I just wanted to throw out there is from Bluff. Like at the end of your tour, there's Stewart Island, and that's just a really cool island. It's not necessarily somewhere that you want to take your bike because I think there's like 12 miles of paved road, and it's insanely muddy. Like it's a very muddy island on the trail, so you do not want to like take your bike. We left our bikes at the ferry terminal. Like they let us lock our bikes up. I don't know if they do that all the time. Like some people were like, you're not allowed to do that, and then some people were like, yeah, you can. So anyways, we did that. We took the ferry over there, and I'm just gonna say, like, I was not expecting how crazy that ferry ride was gonna be, and it kind of freaked me out. But it's just a rough stretch of water, and it's kind of a smaller, lower to the ground ferry, but the way back out was fine. I think just some days it's pretty rough. It's a great place. It's the best place to see kiwis in the wild. So we saw kiwis there, and we did the big hike tour around there, which was really challenging, but there's also the Great Walk, which if you like plan it in advance would be really fun. Just some general tips and just some last things to think about is clean your bike, especially after 90 Mile Beach and after the Wanganui section. If you take the Wanganui River Adventures jet boat, or if you get to Pipiriki and you camp at their holiday park, they have like a whole bike cleaning station. And then after 90 Mile Beach, I stayed at the campground just off the beach. It's the cheapest one. There's like and it's beautiful. It's like this big, huge farm this family owns. And yeah, they let me clean my bike off there, which was really nice. The bike mechanics in New Zealand, I had to visit them a lot, especially in the beginning, because I had some bike issues, and some local people had to help me too because I had like a tire explode. It was terrible. And they had to like drive me to Whangarei, and I had to get a new tire. It was a whole ordeal. Luckily, people were very helpful, and the bike mechanics were really helpful. I feel like the culture in New Zealand is like very biker friendly, and if you tell them you're doing the TA, they kind of like prioritize you and try and get you in because they know you're on a time limit. And they do very nice work. I would bring a water filter. There were some campgrounds that didn't have potable water, and there were some sections, like when I was camping in Wanganui, on that Wanganui River section, like I had to filter my own water. Anyways, yeah, so I hope you got something out of this. I hope you do the tour. I felt like it was a really good experience cycling New Zealand. Like, they put a lot of effort into their bike trails, and there's just like beautiful, amazing people and amazing landscape and birds, and it was all in all a really fun tour. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them. But if you're like nervous and thinking about it, like if you don't think you're ready, just do it. Like, you're gonna learn so much along the way. But yeah.